Hello, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. At today's meeting of the Coalition of the Resolute, which took place at NATO headquarters in Brussels, four main goals of the participants of this alliance were announced, who wish to help Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression. Safe sky, safe sea, peace on land strong, Ukrainian army. This is exactly what the FMU talked about. The UK Defence Minister John Healey, before the start of the coalition, of the Resolute meeting. And he emphasized that helping to establish these goals will be the security assurance forces. That is the future military grouping of the coalition, the Resolute, about the creation of which they continue to debate among themselves, the coalition participants. But here, the main thing, of course, is not just the intentions that are declared. The main thing is the answer to the question, under what circumstances and how. That is, when can security guarantee forces appear in Ukraine during the continuation of military actions on the Russian-Ukrainian front. And this despite the fact that there are no signs of a ceasefire. Currently, we do not see any, and the Russian-American negotiations on this matter have essentially reached a deadlock. And from the perspective of the Kremlin's intentions, it is more of a stalling tactic. During the truce, if conditions, a ceasefire can be achieved in the near future, and this will be a diplomatic success for US President Donald Trump, or after the ceasefire is replaced by a long-term stable peace on Ukrainian soil. After all, these are three completely different situations, as we understand. Continuation of hostilities, ceasefire, and lasting peace. It is worth noting that the leadership of the Russian Federation, led by Putin, is firmly opposed to any possibility of the presence of NATO member countries' troops on Ukrainian soil. And the President of the United States, who at the beginning of his tenure was an advocate for deploying such a contingent, now avoids any discussions, not only about it, but also about the possibility of American support for such a mission, even logistically. And this will mean that European countries, as well as other countries that are willing to participate in such a mission, well, let's say countries like, will be forced to make decisions outside of approval from Moscow and more outside of approval from Washington. At their own discretion, they realize that they are risking the safety of their military personnel, who will appear in Ukraine even under conditions of prolonged peace. Because we understand perfectly well that the Russian Federation can, at any moment, refuse from any agreements that it will reach with the USA. Well, let's say after a new occupant appears in the Oval Office in Washington. Of course, the question arises, what is the path to achieving all those goals declared by the Resolute Coalition? For instance, peace in the sky. Does this mean the airspace of Ukraine will be patrolled by Western aircraft and they will be ready, together with Ukrainian pilots, to destroy Russian targets in the sky over Ukraine, to put an end once and for all to the Russian air terror that has been ongoing for 3 years, intensifies, and shows no signs of ending, at least from the side of the Russian leadership. Peace at sea. Does this mean that European ships might appear in the Black Sea basin to patrol this area together with the Ukrainian naval forces and put an end to the destabilizing efforts of the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet? That pirate band on old ships peace on land. So we return to this topic that we already discussed at the beginning of our conversation. When and how will these forces appear? Ensuring security? And will they appear at all? Or will the negotiation process, which continues among the coalition of the resolute countries, not lead to any concrete results, as has often been the case with Western discussions on how to end the war in Ukraine and the strong Ukrainian army? This also involves allocating significant funds so that the Ukrainian armed forces can be a modern contingent that will not only be capable of resisting new aggression, but also intimidating the aggressor, and thus making it impossible for them to plan further advances on Ukrainian territory. This also includes the possibility of training Ukrainian servicemen by Western colleagues, which also requires a clear answer to the questions of where, when, and under what circumstances, on the territory of Western countries or on the territory of Ukraine, or both on the territory of Western countries and on the territory of Ukraine. But in the case that such training is intensive and continuous on the territory of Ukraine, it is necessary. There will also be the involvement of Western servicemen and their presence on the territory of the country, which at any moment could become a target for a new predatory attack by the Russian Federation. All these questions will have to be answered. Perhaps not during today's Brussels meeting, but during the next meetings of the coalition of the resolute. And of course, here we will not manage without searching for answers to another urgent and I would say central question. And what will the real participation of the United States be? To what extent are Donald Trump's United States ready to finally distance themselves from the democratic world, of which they were the leader before the election of the current American head of state at? Will the USA continue to help Ukraine in its resistance to the aggression of the Russian Federation? Will the USA be a security guarantor for European countries? Will they help their other allies? Or, on the contrary, will they try to establish friendly relations with dictatorial regimes whose leaders are constantly praised by Donald Trump? Without a clear and understandable answer to this question, of course, no coalition of the resolute will be able to act effectively. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow my social media, the Patreon channel, buy me a coffee, Ko-Fi, Donalds that help develop these resources. Use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Victory and peace to you.